Welcome, everyone, to another episode of CPAC Live. This is an extra special version of the show as we are driving around Kansas, the great state of Kansas, my hometown state of Kansas, and we just are now leaving Atchison, Kansas. Now, Atchison, Kansas is famous for many things. The most important thing, after having just been talking to a bunch of people who live here, it's like the greatest town in the world, let me tell you that. I had dinner last night with my mom at a great restaurant, great Kansas beef. And I got a tour of Benedictine College, which I was really impressed about. I had read a lot about Benedictine College, but I got to meet some of the students. I got to meet some of them this morning. I got to talk to the president of the college, and wow, what an impressive place. I went to the University of Notre Dame, which is very famous for its grotto. Well, Benedictine's grotto is something to behold. So I encourage everybody, if you're going through northeastern Kansas, to stop by Atchison, Kansas. And of course, the hometown of the great Amelia Earhart as well, and I was able to drive by her house last night. So we are driving around Kansas. I actually don't even know what my next stop is. Someone will shout it out to me. We go from town to town on behalf of, obviously, our great president who needs 4 more years. And as I keep saying, if the president gets 4 more years, and I keep getting corrected by crowd members that say when the president gets 4 more years. The people of Kansas are really, really pleased with what the president's been able to get done. And then we have this great candidate for the Senate, Roger Marshall, who's in a real dogfight here in Kansas. A lot of people in the swamp always say take Kansas for granted and assume that Kansas will always be Republican. But when you live in a state like Kansas, you realize the Democratic Party is alive and well. And unfortunately, liberalism and socialism is trying to make its marks here as well. And specifically, one of the big problems in a lot of these races is the fact that they are so well funded on the left. So this is something to keep in mind throughout the country, not just with the president's race, but with all these races, how much money the left is raising, how much money is coming into these states. Chuck Schumer just sent in $7.5 billion to try to defeat Roger Marshall. And so we will get outspent in most of these races. It's hard to believe that because you think always the Republican Party, the conservative movement, we have so many entrepreneurs, so many successful people, but those types of people don't think about politics all day long. They think about their families, they think about their businesses. Of course, they love their country, but these socialists, politics is all they have. It's kind of like their church and their religion, and they're spending big all across the country. Jake LaTurner is a great candidate for the congressional seat in the Topeka area, the 2nd District of Kansas. And I'm going to get to see Amanda Atkins, who's the Republican nominee, to take back the 3rd congressional seat in Kansas. That's the Kansas City area that Hillary Clinton barely won. In 2016, Bill Clinton was able to win this district one time. It's what you would consider your typical swing congressional district, and here, just like everywhere, there's a great concern with poll numbers. This is something, as I've traveled throughout the country, people are just getting weird poll numbers back. But what I caution Republicans is they're not the only ones getting strange poll numbers. There's a lot of Democrats getting strange poll numbers as well, and that is because we've never shut down the economy. We've never had a pandemic. These are all historical events. Or never had a pandemic where we shut down the economy, I should say it that way. And certainly we haven't had a pandemic like this for 100 years. And it makes a big impact on people's concern. It's completely unsafe. This virus nags at all of us, of course. Nobody likes it. Everybody's a little worried what happens if someone older in their family gets sick. But let's remember, with college students, there have been 2 college students that have gone to hospital around the country. No fatalities, thank God. So we can do this in a common sense way, and thank God the president seems to be doing so much better. I love seeing him come out of Walter Reed the other day, and great news about the First Lady. And CNN, NBC, and the rest of the fake news media will talk about the fact that there have been these infections around the White House. Mercy and I were both at the announcement of Amy Coney Barrett to fill this seat on the Supreme Court. We have both tested negative more than once with different types of tests, so we're thankful that we're safe, and we're thankful that the people that we know that were there as well have overwhelmingly tested negative as well. it's great to be on this bus. It's great to be back at my home state. And from here, I'm going to go to the NRA convention and talk about our Second Amendment, which is definitely under attack. As you all know, Joe Biden said one of the first things he'll do if he's elected is he'll reinstate the hunting rifle ban, the semi-auto ban, which he had a big role in getting passed the first time during the Clinton administration. He says he wants to put that back on the books. And when asked in a debate if the Second Amendment wasn't a guaranteed individual right and if he would take big steps to restrain it, his answer was bingo. So we know what Joe Biden wants to do when it comes to the Second Amendment, and I'll be glad to talk to these great Constitution lovers with the NRA. And from there, I'm going to be going to Nevada. I'm going to be back on the Trump bus and talking with the voters of Nevada. Nevada is one of these states that the Trump campaign has invested millions of dollars in. There's a whole grassroots army. Chairman McDonald out there is doing a great job with the Republican Party. The governor of Nevada, just like all these socialist governors, has tried everything he could to shut down this presidential campaign, to shut down churches, to shut down schools. I went to an evangelical church the last time I was on the Trump bus in Nevada, and I mean, people are worried that they're going to get arrested for going to church, and that's just not the America that we know, and it's not right. People ought to be able to have, if you have the individual right in this country, which I don't really believe in, but it's legal to end your pregnancy. Are you kidding me? These same socialists are saying you don't have the individual right to go and worship as you please with your colleagues and with your community. That's just not right. And so Nevada, there's a real pushback to what's going on with these socialist governors. And of course, if any of you were able to watch the great Tucker Carlson last night, he went through a whole list of these hypocrites who tell us there should be a universal mask mandate, but yet there's all kinds of videos and photos of these same politicians like Dianne Feinstein, who said there ought to be a universal mask mandate everywhere at all times for all people. When she gets on her private jet, she didn't feel the need to wear a mask. Now, we just crossed over some railroad tracks. By the way, I know it was a little bumpy, but that's all about freedom and the free economy, because that means goods are moving around in the state of Kansas. Kansas is one of those places where we grow things and we make things, and people all over the world and all over the country want those things. So I always think that is great when we go over railroad tracks in Kansas. And you know, the people of California, they need some more of those railroad tracks because, as you know, they've been having a lot of brownouts because they've decided to not use fossil fuels to generate any electricity. So one of the things I've been talking to the people here about is what socialism does. And if you look at California, if you look at New York, if you look at Chicago, if you look at our major cities, unfortunately, even Kenosha, Wisconsin, you see the violence, you see the crime, you see the elevated murder rates, you see small businesses closing down. It's a really sad thing when you see a mom and pop business, a business that people spent their whole life trying to build up, having it shut down. We know this at CPAC. There are people that are going to try to make sure we don't have CPAC in February. We're going to have it. We just had CPAC in North Carolina, and we're going to show you some great video from that CPAC in North Carolina. And of course, you can go to our website at conservative.org and get your tickets for CPAC Michigan, which is coming up in Macomb County. We're going to be at a great drive-in movie theater. Some people will stay in their cars. Some people will be outside. We have a great list of speakers, which is all on our website. And after that, we're going to have CPAC Minnesota, which I believe is on the 22nd. And you can go to our website and sign up for that as well. So great here in the heartland of the country. Great to be with all of you. Roger Marshall's in a dogfight here in Kansas. If you want to help him, please go to the Kansas Republican website, and they will direct you in all kinds of ways you can help him. Obviously, if you're watching us from Kansas, vote for him and vote in person, because the post office loses 5% of mail. Unless you have a very good reason to vote absentee, go vote in person. And if you don't live in Kansas, but you want to make sure you're supporting the right kind of races to make sure Republicans hold on to that majority, please go to the website and help them out financially. I know it's getting bumpier and bumpier, but just remember, if we lose the majority in the Senate, and if we were to lose the White House, the Democrats intend to get rid of the legislative filibuster, expand the number of justices on the Supreme Court, jam in the most left-wing justices you could ever imagine onto that Supreme Court. They will nationalize every major issue, including voting. So what they've done to change the law in Nevada and what they've done to change the law in New York, they will do for the and in California as well, they want to do for the entire country. And we simply can't let that stand. Seats to the District of Columbia, and the list of horribles will go on from there. We obviously know they want no restriction on abortion at any time in a pregnancy. Roe v. Wade actually allows states to pass restrictions on abortion, certainly at the point of viability forward at least. All that will be over as they go back to this idea of this socialist stream, which is such a nightmare for every country that embraces socialism, every city in this country that elects those socialist leaders. We got to fight hard against this whole idea of this cancer of socialism in the country. And go to our website to learn how you can help with our campaign, which we're calling America versus Socialism. Donald Trump is our great leader, but it's America that's on the line this November. It's great to be with you from the bus. I know you're patient as it's a little noisy and a little bumpy, and we're going to show you some great highlights from our CPAC in North Carolina, where we had some great members of Congress, including Ted Budd and Mark Walker, who's going to be leaving Congress, but maybe we'll get him back here sometime in the future, and other great folks who are with us in North Carolina. Let's save our country, folks, and hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
Good afternoon. Well, I'm like one of the earlier speakers. I hate going after all these dynamic people that you've had speaking on the stage. But one of the ways we try to save time in Congress is to say, I associate myself with my colleagues' remarks so that we don't have to repeat what they've said. I got here almost on time for when I was originally on the schedule, but unfortunately I had to go to a funeral. Our wonderful chairman of the Wilkes County Republican Party died unexpectedly this week, and so I had to stop in Wilkesboro for that. I didn't get to stay for the entire funeral, but so far the speakers I've heard have been fantastic, and I want to say I agree with all of them. They've done a fantastic job. I want to thank Matt Schlapp, Jim Womack, ACU, everybody who's involved with putting on this event today. It does not hurt us to be reminded of the principles you've been hearing about today. It never hurts. I'm just sorry we don't have more folks to hear those things, and we need to make sure that we get this word out to lots of other people, and we have a chance to do that in the election coming up. You all are the ones who are committed to the ideas and the cause of conservatism, and I'm always invigorated and reinvigorated by being with folks like you. I was asked to talk about the threat of socialism to our American tradition on campuses, the traditions of individual liberty, freedom of expression, and limited government. Nowhere is that threat more apparent than on most college campuses today. Now, we know we have a few outstanding places where there's not a problem, but for the vast majority of the campuses, it is a problem. In my role as the Republican leader of the House Committee on Education, I've witnessed firsthand how the pervasive liberal bias in higher education has fully metastasized over the past decade into an open embrace of full-blown socialism and its worst authoritarian impulses. Open inquiry and the pursuit of truth are no longer the hallmarks of American education. You know, I wanted to be a high school English teacher, but I was too poor to do student teaching. But I was able to get a master's in college teaching, and I taught at Appalachian for 15 years, a long time ago. And I will tell you, every semester, I taught sociology, and I was really a round peg in a square hole. My husband told me that the entire time I was there because of my being so conservative. But every semester I did an evaluation in my class. And the greatest thing my students would say to me in that evaluation was, "She taught me to think for the first time in a class. She taught me to think." There is no greater thing that a student can say about a teacher than that. That is not what is happening on college campuses these days. It is just the opposite. The college campus experience used to be an explosion of independent thought and free expression, but it is now characterized by the expectation of rigid conformity to extreme leftist ideologies. Any dissent is quickly stamped out by a rush to judgment, by mob rule. But you don't need me to tell you that. You've probably all heard the reports of anti-conservative, anti-Semitic, and anti-religious behavior that is now de rigueur in the fever swamps of academia. Many college campuses across the country have been swept up in anti-Semitic and anti-Israel nonsense about divesting from any kind of investment in Israel because it is supposedly an apartheid state. I'm not making this up. Students at Columbia voted to do this very thing just last week by a wide margin. And Columbia is only the most recent to jump on this bandwagon. Dozens of colleges and universities have pursued similar policies with the goal of harming and delegitimizing the only true democracy and our strongest ally in the Middle East. Plus, forces of socialism on campus are enforcing a new doctrine that attempts to stigmatize both conservative and the basic tenets of free market capitalism by making the completely outrageous claim that capitalism is fundamentally racist. Have you looked at the material that was put on the website of the African American Museum? Have any of you seen that? Go Google it if you haven't seen it. It is scary. That's right. They claim that the economic system that created historic levels of prosperity and innovation and that rescued people of all races from poverty while freeing billions to pursue their God-given dreams, this system of freedom and prosperity is supposed to be inherently racist. I wish we could just laugh this off as a handful of crazy professors protected by the power of tenure. But that's not the case, and it hasn't been so for a long time. Ideas like this, the insane concept that capitalism is a racist system, these ideas are no longer far, far on the fringes of campus life. These ideas are now mainstreamed by campus cultures that worship political correctness, conformity to leftist propaganda, and diversity in everything. Everything except, of course, diverse political or religious viewpoints. We can't assume that the toxic ideas festering in many of our colleges will stay confined to the ivory tower any longer. Just take a look around you. Violence instead of debate, threats instead of tolerance, confiscation instead of capitalism. That's what our young people are being spoon-fed. Consider a recent report out of Vanderbilt. A class purporting to be on American elections instructed students that the Constitution, quote, was designed to perpetuate white supremacy, end quote. Apparently, the professors who are teaching this class haven't read the Constitution lately. But this sort of thing does help explain why so many colleges seem bent on erasing any kind of tribute to our founders from their campuses. Here's the truth. The only way to restore sanity and real education to our college campuses is to make a full-throated defense of free speech for all students and faculty. The era of leftist conformity and socialist propaganda on campus has made a mockery of free inquiry and free expression. Students and faculty of all political persuasions should be allowed and encouraged to give voice to the ideas that made our nation the freest and most prosperous in history. The preservation of our republic and protection of the ideas that inspired our founding and have sustained us for generations depend on the next generation of Americans. I want those students to say in a class, the professor taught me how to think. That's what I want them to be able to say. If we're to continue as a nation that cherishes freedom of speech, limited government, and individual liberty, we must have an educated population who will defend these ideas rather than tear them down. And that defense must be allowed, must be celebrated on our campuses. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here, and may God continue to bless you and our great country.